The chamber fell silent. Cameras zoomed in. Millions would soon watch what no one saw coming. At first it seemed like just another exchange on Capitol Hill, another day, another hearing, another senator flexing his authority. But in the tense air of that room, something different was brewing. Ted Cruz leaned forward, voice sharp, words slicing through the atmosphere like a knife. Before Jasmine Crockett could even finish her thought, he cut across her sentence, a dismissive wave of his hand, a tone dripping with condescension, an interruption so abrupt it pulled every eye in the chamber to the clash unfolding. She inhaled, steady and calm, trying to continue, but again Cruz pushed back in. This was not debate, this was dominance play, the kind Cruz had mastered on stages where he thought his power went unchallenged. By the third interruption, whispers began to stir among the audience, reporters scribbling furiously, aides shifting in their chairs. Crockett's composure held, her eyes narrowed, but her voice remained deliberate, dignified. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Cruz, loud, insistent, impatient, Crockett poised, deliberate, unwilling to surrender her ground. The fourth interruption came louder, sharper. Cruz's frustration was growing. He expected compliance. Instead, he was facing resilience, and resilience is a power arrogant men often underestimate. By the fifth time he sliced across her voice, tension wrapped around the chamber like a coiled spring. The spectacle wasn't just about policy anymore, it was about respect. It was about who gets to be heard in America and who gets silenced. The sixth interruption nearly brought the room to a halt. Even some of Cruz's colleagues shifted uncomfortably. He was pushing the limits, testing the patience not only of his opponent but of the very audience he claimed to represent. But Jasmine Crockett did not break. Her voice held steady. Her gaze never faltered. To the untrained eye, it may have looked like Cruz was winning, overwhelming, dominating, overpowering with sheer volume, but anyone paying attention could see the truth. Every interruption was building to something. Every time he cut her off, the tension rose higher, the anticipation sharper. Viewers at home could feel it. Those in the chamber leaned in, waiting, knowing instinctively that something was about to snap. And then it came. The seventh interruption. Cruz opened his mouth, once again certain he could bulldoze through Crockett's words. He leaned in, ready to silence, ready to dominate one last time. But what he didn't realize was that his seventh attempt would not end the way the others had. This time it wouldn't be Crockett's voice that was cut short. It would be his. Because when Jasmine Crockett finally fired back, she didn't just answer Cruz. She ended him. The setting wasn't just any committee hearing. It was a battleground disguised as procedure, a place where laws are debated but reputations are forged and sometimes destroyed. For Ted Cruz, this was another chance to play the role he relished, the combative senator who wielded interruption like a weapon. For Jasmine Crockett, it was something far deeper. This was about presence, about being heard in a chamber that for generations had tried to mute voices like hers. Every raised eyebrow, every impatient sigh from Cruz carried the weight of a larger story, the story of who gets to command the floor and who is told to sit down. And Crockett, standing in that lineage of fighters before her, understood the stakes better than anyone. Her voice wasn't just hers, it was an echo of communities too often pushed aside, a counterweight to the arrogance of power. Cruz, for all his theatrics, believed he was winning. Each interruption was meant to cut deeper, to remind Crockett that his authority was untouchable. But with each dismissal, he revealed more of his own insecurity. It wasn't strength he projected, it was fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being outshined. That is why this moment mattered. It wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was dignity against arrogance, respect against condescension, a fight that transcended the chamber walls. What was about to unfold would echo far beyond the committee room into headlines, hashtags, and history. Millions who had never set foot inside that chamber would soon know Jasmine Crockett's name, not as someone interrupted, but as someone who refused to be silenced. Ted Cruz has always relished the spotlight. To his supporters, he is polished, articulate, a man who thrives on confrontation. To his critics, he is the senator who never met a microphone he didn't love or an opponent he didn't try to bulldoze. Over the years, Cruz has built a reputation not just for debating policy, but for dominating the stage. His interruptions, his grandstanding, his fiery tangents have become part of his political brand. He has styled himself as a defender of liberty, a champion of the Constitution, a guardian of free speech. Yet time and again his actions reveal a contradiction too glaring to ignore. In hearings and debates, the freedom he so passionately preaches seems reserved only for himself. When others speak, particularly those he deems beneath his authority, that freedom vanishes beneath a wall of interruptions and dismissals. The pattern is clear. Cruz uses volume where others use reason. He wields condescension as a shield, and often it works. Many opponents stumble under his pressure, faltering as he cuts them off, reroutes their arguments, or overwhelms them with rehearsed indignation. It's a strategy honed over years: dominate first, then declare victory. So when Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, Cruz saw not a formidable opponent, but just another voice to steamroll. He leaned back in his chair with the ease of a man who believed the outcome was already decided. Why should this be any different from the dozens of clashes before? He had faced senators, governors, even presidential contenders. A first-term congresswoman he thought would be no match for his practiced routine. But arrogance has a way of blinding even the sharpest operator. Cruz misjudged the resolve in Crockett's eyes, mistook composure for weakness, mistook dignity for silence. He didn't see the trap he was setting for himself, one interruption at a time. Because this time, the senator picked the wrong target. Jasmine Crockett did not arrive in Congress by accident. Her journey began in the courtrooms of Texas, where she built her reputation as a relentless attorney for those society often overlooked. She was the lawyer who took the cases others cast aside, the advocate who stood beside the poor, the marginalized, and the voiceless when few others would. To her, the law wasn't a ladder for personal gain, it was a shield for those who had been told they had none. From the start, she was underestimated, too young, too bold, too unwilling to play by the quiet rules of politics. She was told to wait her turn, to temper her passion, to make herself smaller if she wanted to survive. But Crockett never shrank. Each dismissal became fuel. Each stereotype of fire she turned into determination. The courtroom became her training ground, the people her clients became her teachers, and every victory, no matter how small, reminded her that dignity matters most when the odds are stacked against you. Her rise to Congress carried the same spirit. She did not run for herself alone. She ran as the extension of every community that had been ignored, every voice drowned out by louder, richer, more powerful interests. Her presence in Washington was not symbolic, it was defiant. For those watching across the country, especially young women of color, her seat at the table was a reminder that representation is not given, it is fought for. And Crockett never forgot that fight. She carried it into every debate, every policy discussion, every clash where arrogance sought to eclipse substance. She understood what it meant to be dismissed before speaking, to be judged before finishing a sentence, to be underestimated before even being heard. That experience did not weaken her, it fortified her. So when Ted Cruz leaned across the table, interrupting her with the arrogance of a man who had played this role 1,000 times before, Crockett was ready, not because she had rehearsed for him specifically, but because her entire life had prepared her for men like him. And in that chamber, every lesson she had lived prepared her for the moment Cruz tried to silence her. The exchange began like a steady drumbeat of disrespect. The first interruption came fast, sharp, cutting Crockett's words before her argument could even take shape. Cruz leaned forward, eyebrows raised as if to signal that her point wasn't worth hearing. She paused, measured, and continued. The second interruption followed moments later, louder, more insistent. This time he waved his hand dismissively as though brushing away a fly. Crockett held her ground, refusing to let frustration creep into her tone. By the third time, the rhythm was undeniable, cut short, dismissed, overruled. Each moment felt like déjà vu. Cruz inserting himself with an air of practiced dominance. Reporters in the back began scribbling notes, sensing this was more than a routine clash. The fourth interruption drew a murmur from the room. Crockett's composure had not cracked, but Cruz's voice was rising, sharp with impatience. He leaned on volume, on force, while she countered with calm. The imbalance was striking, arrogance clashing with quiet confidence. The fifth interruption stretched the tension tighter. Even some of Cruz's colleagues shifted uneasily in their chairs, glancing toward him with discomfort. What was supposed to look like strength was starting to feel like insecurity, the repetition exposing desperation. By the sixth time he sliced across Crockett's voice, the atmosphere was electric. Each interruption had built upon the last, stacking like thunderclouds before a storm. The chamber wasn't simply watching a debate anymore, they were watching a test of endurance, of dignity, of who could hold steady under pressure. Crockett sat poised, every ounce of her restraint now part of the drama. Cruz meanwhile grew louder, sharper, his interruptions more jagged, as though the sound of her voice itself had become unbearable to him. And then came interruption number 7. The seventh interruption cracked the air like a whip. Cruz leaned in, his voice louder than ever, as though sheer volume could carry the day. He cut across Crockett mid-sentence, once again reaching for the familiar weapon of dominance. But this time, Jasmine Crockett did not simply pause. She let the silence linger, let the weight of his arrogance hang in the room like smoke no one wanted to breathe. The chamber froze. Cameras zoomed closer. Even Cruz seemed caught off guard by the stillness. He expected protest, fluster, retreat. Instead, he got a pause so sharp it became its own rebuttal. And then Crockett spoke. Her words were calm, deliberate, each syllable landing like a stone in water, rippling outward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She looked him square in the eye and reminded the chamber and the millions watching that respect is not granted by the loudest man in the room. It is earned by those who refuse to bow. The first sentence landed, and there was a murmur, a cough in the back, a shuffle of papers. Cruz shifted in his chair, attempting to smile, but the tightness at the corners of his mouth betrayed him. She continued, each phrase sharper than the last, dismantling his interruptions one by one. What he had intended as dominance now stood exposed as desperation. And then came the line that broke through the noise, that sliced clean through the arrogance, that sent Cruz's composure cracking like glass under pressure. Crockett's voice carried not just her own conviction, but the strength of every person who had ever been told to be quiet. She delivered it with surgical precision, not rushed, not shouted, but perfectly measured. Gasps fluttered through the room. Some covered their mouths, others leaned back as though bracing against a shock wave. Cruz blinked, visibly rattled, fumbling for words he no longer had. His interruptions had always been his armor, but now they lay shattered at his feet. The murmurs grew louder. Reporters glanced at one another, already imagining the headlines. Staffers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Social media, though the chamber could not see it, was already erupting, clips snipped, captions drafted, hashtags exploding across timelines. Crockett, meanwhile, sat steady, the calm at the center of the storm. She did not gloat. She did not need to. Her silence between sentences spoke louder than any flourish could. She had taken Cruz's weapon and turned it back on him with elegance and force. That seventh interruption wasn't Cruz shutting her down, it was Crockett shutting him down for good. The moment the clip hit the airwaves, it was unstoppable. Within minutes, hashtags began to surge. #Crockett vs Cruz, #7th interruption, and simply Jasmine. Social media feeds filled with the soundbite, the pause, the takedown that no amount of bluster could erase. Memes spread like wildfire. Cruz frozen mid-interruption beside captions that mocked his arrogance. Crockett poised in still frames that radiated composure. Twitter lit up with reactions from every corner of the spectrum. Progressive activists hailed Crockett as a rising star. Journalists described it as one of the most powerful live moments of the year. Even late-night comedians couldn't resist, replaying the seventh interruption with punchlines that needed little setup. The clip wasn't just being watched, it was being replayed, remixed, and shared across every platform. Commentators poured in. Anchors on morning shows dissected the exchange frame by frame, marveling at how Crockett had flipped the narrative with nothing more than poise and timing. Celebrities weighed in, some tweeting simple applause emojis, others penning full threads about what it meant to see a black woman stare down arrogance and refuse to be silenced. Everyday citizens joined the chorus, posting their own stories of interruption and dismissal, drawing strength from the way Crockett had turned the tables. The ripple effect was unmistakable. Students cited her in classrooms. Community organizers shared the clip at rallies. In living rooms and break rooms, people replayed the moment and felt seen. It wasn't just about a senator and a congresswoman anymore. It was about every battle between dignity and condescension, every fight to be heard in a world that too often rewards the loudest voice in the room. But the true power of her words wouldn't be measured in retweets, it would be measured in legacy. In the days that followed, the noise around the hearing quieted, but the meaning of the moment only grew louder. For Jasmine Crockett, the clash with Ted Cruz was never just about one senator's arrogance. It was about something far larger, the eternal battle between voice and suppression, dignity and dismissal. When she finally addressed the confrontation publicly, her words reframed the exchange into a lesson every American could feel in their bones. She reminded the nation that composure is not weakness, it is strength under fire, to stay steady when pushed, to hold firm when dismissed, to answer arrogance with clarity instead of chaos that is real power. Cruz had wielded interruption as though it were invincibility, but what the country saw instead was fragility. Each attempt to silence her only amplified the dignity of her response. His arrogance revealed itself as insecurity. Her patience revealed itself as courage. It was a reversal so complete that no headline could capture its full weight. And that was the true lesson. Crockett's victory was not just over a single opponent in a single chamber. It was a win for every student who has been talked over in a classroom, every worker cut off in a meeting, every voice dismissed before being heard. She carried their stories with her in that hearing, and when she refused to be silenced, she showed them that they too could hold their ground. Her victory wasn't just over Cruz, it was for everyone who's ever been told to sit down and stay quiet. The hearing began as just another clash in Washington, but it ended with a turning point no one could ignore. 6 times Ted Cruz tried to silence Jasmine Crockett, each interruption sharper than the last, but it was the 7th, the moment he thought he had her cornered, that changed everything. Instead of silence, the nation witnessed strength. Instead of retreat, the chamber heard resolve. That was the moment the story flipped, the moment arrogance crumbled and dignity stood taller than ever. Because history has always proven one truth: bluster may be loud, but it never lasts. What endures are the voices that refuse to be shut down. What carries forward are the words spoken with courage, composure, and clarity. Crockett's response wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a reminder to us all that justice and dignity outlast arrogance every single time. And now it's our turn. If you believe voices like Jasmine Crockett's deserve to be heard louder than ever, subscribe, share, and stand with us. Together we amplify dignity, together we drown out arrogance, and together we write the next chapter of a story that is still unfolding.